Labą dieną.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Seimas, speakers, and everybody who joined us online. I want to welcome all of you to the International Conference, International Commitments to Children, Realities and Upcoming Changes in Lithuania. Today, we will be speaking about children because this is one of the key topics in our lives. This topic is crucial not only because we own those children, but this is the starting point for our concern for the human being. It is extremely important to start from the very beginning and to focus on children, to show respect, to show compassion, in order to prevent further problems in life. But children is something that we should care and be preoccupied from the very beginning. Therefore, I would like to give the floor to Lukas Korelnius Vaičiakas, head of the Secretariat of the Speaker of the Seimas. Unfortunately, the speaker cannot attend our conference herself in person. And therefore, I give the floor to her head of the Secretariat. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, participants of the conference, both here and following us online. I give the very best regards of Victoria Chmilytė-Nielsen, Speaker of the Seimas. One of the main issues that is going to be discussed today is the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on a Communications Procedure. Different organizations on children and youth encourage enabling and empowering every member of the community of children and young people. We're also striving to give more opportunities to young people. Young people are considered from the age of 14 in Lithuania and minors until the age of 18. Communities representing children and its representative, Liepa, said that our duties and rights have been joined in one chain. If we lose one part of the chain, we will lose the entire chain. Therefore, all the parts of the chain need to be united. We need to remember that every child has the same rights, and we should execute our duties to uphold those rights. Ladies and gentlemen, participants of the conference, you will be speaking about the commitments of Lithuania and expected changes. I hope that new recommendations will be discussed and old recommendations will be overviewed. I hope that this will be beneficial to the decision makers in the future. Thank you very much. I wish you a successful conference. Thank you. Now I would like to give the floor to a co-organizer of this conference, namely Tomas Vytautas Raskevičius, chair of the Seimas Committee on Human Rights. A child is not an object, but a human being. The idea seems to be basically simple, but it should not be taken for granted. A child who is a human being has human rights, and these rights are not granted by parents, teachers, or even politicians. The child simply has them. The right not to be beaten, the right not to be snapped at, the right not to be silenced as the adults speak, the right to be different, and the right to be oneself. And do you know why every adult is a potential ally in defending and enforcing children's rights? Because each of us, unfortunately, still has this inner child who may have been injured or victimized for a very long time. Today, I also feel my inner child who was bullied at school. The worst were years 7 and 8 when I was 11, 12, or 13 years old. Initially, I was bullied for my good academic performance. Then, when my puberty began, I was bullied for my appearance. Finally, homophobic issues emerged. I could not pass the school corridor in peace. I could be slammed against the wall and called disgusting names. And I'm happy today that many new-built schools in Lithuania have no corridors at all. Instead, open and inclusive spaces are created. The spaces where our children study and change. But have those dark corridors that we still have in our heads disappeared? I would very much like politicians engaged in politics at both national and municipal level to speak more about children's rights and education in particular. Education is not just about knowledge or performance, as children in schools do not study mathematics only or geography only. Children learn how to be people at school, which to a large extent determines in what kind of state, society, town, and country we live. Education is not a fast investment. It is not like constructing a bridge or an office building. But empowering the creators of the future and inspiring them constitute an example of genuine political leadership, ambition, and vision. Today's International Conference on International Obligations for Children will discuss children's rights from a wide range of perspectives. The discussion will include the ratification of the third optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child in Lithuania and the enforcement of the rights of children with disabilities or the protection of children's rights in criminal proceedings. On the other hand, as regards children's rights, I wish the bullying epidemic in Lithuania stopped once and for all. Enough is enough. Last Friday, a student fell from the school window in Vilnius district, and this is not a single or isolated case. In Lithuania, 1 in 3 11 or 13-year students are bullied, and 1 in 4 10th grader in Vilnius has thought of suicide. Anonymous pupil surveys on the prevalence of bullying must be carried out every year in all schools in Lithuania, without exception. Only the recognition of the problem can help to tackle it effectively. Bullying prevention programs in schools must stop being only formal and instead become truly operational, because we will have no future creators if we bully them to death today. On behalf of the Committee on Human Rights, I would like to welcome the speakers, participants, and guests of the International Conference. Thank you for being the allies in defending and safeguarding the rights of the child. And now it is time for the best wishes. On the occasion of the Day of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, I'm thinking about all the future creators, leaders, writers, scholars, Nobel Prize winners, and other outstanding people who are still children today. I wish they were not preoccupied about the future. It is our duty as adults. Just be happy and enjoy your life here and now. Because the main task, your main task, is to simply be happy. I wish a meaningful and productive event.
Dėkojame Tomui Vytautui.
Thank you, Tomas Vytautas Raskevičius, for your welcome address. I'm also grateful to Mr. Lukas Cornelius Vaičekas. I believe that those introductory words have given us the essence of what we are going to talk about today. Later, we're going to speak about details and what is important for us and for children and how to make it happen. We will talk about international commitments that sometimes make us step up our efforts in implementing them. So thank you once again. Thank you for your words. We heard that children are the people that we used to be some time ago. Now we have grown up and we can share our knowledge and experience. Children don't have that experience yet, so therefore we have to support them and to protect. As Mr. Raskevičius said, we have to create a more safe and open environment, not only in schools, but everywhere for children. And as it was rightly said by Mr. Vaičekas, children themselves are looking for ways to exercise their rights. So we are the ones to be beside them and to guide them, to inform them on what they can do. And this new instrument that has been mentioned during the welcome address, the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on a communications procedure that was recently ratified by the Lithuanian Parliament, is one of such instruments. Now let us move on to another part of the conference. And now I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Žiobienė from the institution that contributed to the co-organization of this conference. It's my pleasure to welcome Ombudsperson for the Child's Rights of the Republic of Lithuania. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to see so many of you, irrespective of rather cold weather and slippery road. Well, I guess today we have many more people watching us online rather than being here physically. Just like every year, we're commemorating the day of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Unfortunately, during the pandemic years, we did not have many opportunities to do so. But this year, we have some good news, because after 10 years of discussion, following 10 years of discussion in the Lithuanian Parliament, the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on a communications procedure was ratified. We call it simply as the third protocol, and this gives some insights as to how to implement the Convention. There are a few reasons why we need the protocol, and I guess people who have contributed greatly to that could tell a lot about that, and I believe that Drahoslav Stefanek will be able to tell about, to hear about the story of the protocol. Let me also mention that the Convention is a living organism, which we understand not only through the reports by the states parties. It is the instrument that everyone must be guided in their work, be it a work of a teacher, a lawyer, or someone else. Apart from that, there are a number of comments, and today the Committee on Human Rights, together with other experts, are considering yet another comment on the rights of the child in the context of the climate change. So if you have your own opinion, you can express your opinion to the committee itself. On the other hand, if you have not looked into the comments, if you want to find the Lithuanian version, you can find them in on the website of our organization. We have translated all of the comments by the Committee on the Rights of the Child. There is yet another thing that should be introduced during this conference, and that is the Commission of the Human Rights of the Council of Europe. We've seen such person only during their visits to Lithuania. We haven't seen the last one in Lithuania, but the institution itself is not very well known to our audience. So therefore, it's high time for us to speak about that position. Another important legal instrument is the European Court of Human Rights. We usually deal with certain cases according to separate articles, but the court already addresses the cases related to children as well. Therefore, we were asked to introduce and to talk about such rather painful and sensitive cases and to talk about the various aspects in the civil cases when the family is divorced. Also, by 2024, we will hopefully have a school for everyone, where every child is integrated into the learning process. Therefore, I believe it is of crucial importance. It is to use the experience of Ruškus, of Professor Jonas Ruškus, who has worked in the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities of the United Nations. His experience will be extremely valuable. If we looked at the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we would see that there are quite a lot of issues that must be addressed, but I think that we would need more than a day to address all of those issues. So that's why we wanted to look at only at the most pertinent ones. I'm therefore very grateful to Prosecutor General, who agreed to speak at the conference on very important aspects. I believe that there was some breakthrough because we already have psychologists who participate in judicial interviews. So we have overcome quite a lot of hurdles. There are still hurdles in front of us that we have to overcome. There is yet another important topic that we are very concerned about is the issues of adolescence. When we speak to teenagers, they do not want to be identified neither with children nor with grown-ups. It's the period of age, a rather short one, where the state or state authorities tend to wait and see, because they believe that once a teenager grows up, there will be no problems. But it is only natural that adolescents want to live here and now, and they don't want to use the services that are dedicated for children. For example, day centers are targeted towards children only. Also, we have child psychologists and psychologists for grown-ups, but we don't have psychologists for adolescents. I am not saying that we don't have the services available, but they should be increased in number. It should be admitted as well that in every municipality, and I see one very active mayor, that whenever we talk to municipalities, they do have services. Services are available. They can list many of them. But once we face one or another situation, we see that the services are not targeted towards specific individual. Most probably, they provide services to families. If they have services to families, those services are targeted to every family. If services are targeted to parents undergoing the divorce procedure, again, the services are the same to every person. But teenagers, adolescents want to have the services that are targeted particularly to them. That's why we called Dr. Gintautas Sakalauskas to talk about the most relevant issues when the adolescents, due to various reasons, are pushed to juvenile justice. And sometimes we even face more important problems. But in order to ensure that adolescents can live here and now, the world has to meet their needs and requirements. So I hope that today you will hear very interesting and different aspects. You will get some food for thought, and that this will inspire you in your future work. Thank you.
Ačiū labai.
Thank you very much to the Ombudsperson for the Rights of the Child for opening speech and reminding us the instruments that we have in order to focus on children, to care about them and show compassion to them, because children are an investment into our future. As Mr. Raskevičius mentioned, children are our future. We have instruments. We just need will to implement them. The presentation of instruments might not give positive results, but we need to know how to use those instruments, how to employ them. It would be interesting sometimes to learn about how certain instruments are being developed. Today, we are happy that Lithuania has ratified an international commitment, namely the third optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on a communication procedure. This instrument was developed in a very complicated process. And one of the persons who contributed to the ideas and realization of building and developing this instrument has come and joined to tell us about this, about the importance of this instrument and what can be done about it. Therefore, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Drahoslav Stefanik, Chair of the Working Group on Human Rights from the European External Action Service. He will speak about the development of this optional protocol, how it happened. Mr. Stefanik, the floor is yours. Will you sit here and give your presentation, or you will go to the rostrum?
So settled in with all my papers and also glasses, which I have to change. We are not getting younger. So first of all, thanks for the invitation to Madam Ombudsperson, dear Edita. It's a great honor to be here in Vilnius and to be in the Seimas, in the parliamentary building, to participate in the conference. I had a meeting also with the chair of the Human Rights Committee of Seimas, Tomas Vytautas Raskevičius, who had to leave, but we had a very fruitful talk, and and it was moving to listen to his personal testimony, which he was speaking about in his opening statement, and that's a good example why instruments as the optional protocol to the Convention on the Right of the Child, providing communications procedure, is needed. And I have heard these testimonies when actually the text of protocol was negotiated. I would be maybe describing the process of the adoption of the protocol. Now I'm working for the EU, for the European External Action Service, so I'm dealing with different issues, but of course I'm dealing with human rights still, but I'm now coming back in my memories more than 10 years ago, or it was 13 years ago, when we started the process. Then I was a Slovak diplomat in Geneva, similar as your ambassador Darius Staniulis, who is a good friend of mine, and we were serving together back then as deputy permanent representatives, and happy that Darius has become in the meantime permanent representative of Lithuania to the United Nations office in Geneva. And there are some similarities between the I would say also our two countries. As I said, I'm coming from Slovakia, and when first time there was such an opportunity to take over the coordinatorship and of the proceedings, Slovakia was first time elected to the Human Rights Council, and that was in 2008. As you know, Lithuania is now also first time member of the Human Rights Council. So back then I was a diplomat. We didn't have much experience, and first this process was informally led by Slovenia, by my good colleague Eva Tomic. But then she left. She was leaving Geneva for other commitments, and there was a question who will take over. And she turned to me, because I was then in Geneva for 4 years. We were elected as members to the Human Rights Council, and there was also a call from numerous NGO, civil society organizations, that maybe I could be the right person to do that. I was hesitating to accept that offer, because as also I was already speaking this morning with Mr. Chair of the Human Rights Committee, both Slovakia and Lithuania and our countries of our size have limited human resources and also material resources. So this is reality which we have to face. When I came to Geneva, I was only one at the permanent mission to dealing with human rights, while of course countries as UK, France, and Germany, they have 4 or 5 persons to deal. So it was not easy, but I remember one anecdote, that when I was sitting at one of the meetings, and then the UK human rights advisor came to me, and he said he heard some gossips, or that I could take over. I said it's still gossips, but I haven't decided, and actually he encouraged me that I could do it, and then Slovakia would be a good and reliable partner in leading the initiative. So only then actually I decided to accept that kind of difficult endeavor and difficult task, because it was a huge responsibility upon our shoulders. So first, and I apologize to interpreters that I'm not really now based on the text which I have distributed, but I will get better in the meantime. But this was what I wanted to describe, how the things are sometimes done in corridors or informally, and many important decisions can be taken not only during the official meetings, but in Serpentine Bar, which Darius knows, and Edita probably as well, and in the corridors. So In Geneva, this group of kind of friends was created in 2008. As I said, led first by Slovenia, then taken over by Slovakia. And we wanted to institutionalize the process to make it official. And of course, then you have to go to the Human Rights Council for adoption of the resolution to get a mandate for negotiations. Or it's not so straightforward. You can't go straight away and to say, oh yeah, I want to negotiate convention, protocol, or any legally binding instruments. In some instances, now there are negotiations on the right to development and the legally binding instrument in Geneva. This process is taking 20-25 years. So I'm very happy that we could manage to do the whole process in 2 years. And it took only 3 resolutions of the Human Rights Council, and it was very good sequenced. There was one resolution of the Human Rights Council 2009, then 2010, and 2011. In 2009, in June 2009, it was the first kick-off, launching the process, when the Human Rights Council decided, it was still at 11th session, to establish the working group of the Human Rights Council to explore the possibility of elaborating the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So you see, so it was first just to explore the possibility. We held some seminars before, some, of course, with the members of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, with the civil society, with member states before submitting such a resolution. And the resolution was adopted by consensus. So working group was created. We discussed non-papers or first, because then you have to really do some testing also the water, if there is such a potential to have an international instrument, especially in the area of the rights of the child, it was not easy. And the idea was actually to have a communications procedure was at the right when the convention was adopted, but it was not materialized. We met first time in December 2009, and I was elected as a chairperson of the working group. I remember also sometimes you take over and you think that things are going smoothly, and all the technical requirements are met. But I recall one anecdote, but it was a very difficult one, because the session was overlapping with the Copenhagen Conference of Parties on climate change, so COP, famous COP, which got longer. And a number of interpreters had to stay in Copenhagen, and they were not available in Geneva, the United Nations. And I was facing at the very beginning, all of UN official meetings have to be in all UN official languages. I mean, English, French, Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. And we are missing Chinese interpreters. And there was a decision in front of me whether to move on. Of course, we all knew that the representatives of China, they all spoke, of course, English or French. And there were some advices like we should go on. But I refused that because I wanted to follow the UN rules. And these decisions could be seen as minor, but China never, in good terms, China never forgot my decision, and they very appreciated. I waited for official interpretation to start official meetings, and it paid off at the end of the day when China was very, very flexible. Although I knew that they would never ratify probably the optional protocol, they were a very constructive partner in the negotiations. And that first session, actually, we had to start first 2 or 3 days. I don't recall now the exact length. Without Chinese interpretation, we went. I turned the meeting into informal consultations. In practice, it was almost the same, but with no kind of official records. But that informal consultations proved to be even maybe more productive then we would have an official meeting. But I also wanted to tell you about this background and sometimes what issues you have to face as the chair. So then we have really constructive debate, again with involvement of states representatives and independent experts, and it made the Human Rights Council to extend the group's mandate in March 2010, and then we got a stronger mandate to elaborate the optional protocol. So you see the things have moved. In June 2009 we were exploring the possibility, while in March 2010, less than 1 year, we got the mandate, straightforward mandate, to elaborate the optional protocol. I drafted the optional protocol, of course, with the help of the Secretariat and with the help of the civil society community, which was very active and which was very strong in moving the things forward. And of course, members of the Committee on the Rights of the Child helped a lot. The then chair of the committee, representative of Republic of Korea, Yang Lee, but also Swiss Vice Chair Jean Zermatten were instrumental in our endeavor and very helpful. Of course, without support of the Committee on the Rights of the Child, we will not be able, I think, to make this initiative real. And also, good coincidence was that that Slovakia had also at that time representative in the Committee on the Rights of the Child, my good colleague and friend Peter Guraň. So we elaborated the text of the draft option protocol, and it was negotiated at one session, but in 2 parts, which is, I think, also a very good idea. We had sessions in December 2010 and February 2011, and that split session allowed us also, in the meantime, between this December and February, to have also a number of informal consultations. The text was a product of a compromise on which the group agreed by consensus after intense and thorough effort of all involved. As I'm saying, it was not only formal meetings, you see, because formal meetings are very limited, but there are a number of informal coordinations, informal consultations, brainstorming. I remember once we organized brainstorming, breakfast actually at the permanent representation of Slovakia in Geneva I think on Sunday actually. So you see, this is all the part of the diplomacy, and I'm very proud that I could be part of that. I could have been part of that process. We had the text, and then we of course we had to test it and to come again back to Human Rights Council, and we did so at the 17th session of the Human Rights Council in June 2011. So only 2 years after we got the first resolution adopted to explore the possibility. I'm happy that the Human Rights Council adopted our draft by consensus, and then it was followed by the final adoption by the United Nations General Assembly in New York on 19th December 2011. And that was really confirmation that the path which was taken was a right one, and then we hit a, I would say, good compromise back then. First of all, of course, I omitted, and I would like to congratulate Lithuania for on ratification of the optional protocol recently on 3rd of October, when Lithuania became a 50th state, around 50th state party to OPIC, as they call it, as it is called in the meantime. So there are 50 states parties. I remember I was invited to Geneva when there was the 5th anniversary of the entering into force. OPIC, optional protocol, entered into force in April 2014, and in 2019 I was at one of the conferences in Geneva, and I remember speaking to, especially again, civil society, NGO, community. They were quite unhappy that we had that time some 40 ratifications. And I told them, and I really meant it, that I was actually happy about that. I was afraid when it was adopted in 2011, the document was so revolutionary and so complex and so comprehensive. So I was even afraid if it would ever enter into force. So I told them, I surprised the representatives of NGOs by saying, on the contrary, I'm very pleased that there are some 40 ratifications. And now we are at the 50, and I hope it will continue every year, slowly but steadily, and we will get even higher numbers. Why it's revolutionary? First of all, I would say that, and this is maybe not totally clear from the text, but children may submit their complaints on their own, without any representation, and by means corresponding to their maturity. So all communications have to be in written, but I can imagine it could be also written in pictures or describing in various forms. So in practice that will be probably, or that is not probably happening, as it is not the only case for the children. Adults are also usually not submitting their communications to various UN treaty bodies by themselves, but in practice it will be legal councils, NGOs, or human rights defenders who will come with complaints or communications. But this option, it's quite revolutionary, and I remember it was very difficult to negotiate that. The protocol draws from similar instruments. We try to use possible agreed language in order to ensure coherence within the treaty body system. And I recall that the adoption of the optional protocol to the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, adopted shortly before negotiations on OPIC in 2008, was quite a helpful and turning point, especially on the issues in respect of justiciability of economic, social and cultural rights. That was a big issue especially for common law countries like US, Australia or UK, where they were insisting on a margin of appreciation and on the implementation of the economic, social and cultural rights and its their specific nature. So on that we were lucky to have some agreed language, and we could avoid the long discussions which actually my colleague Katarina Albuquerque, who was the chairperson of that working group, had to endure. And you will find now the Article 10, Paragraph 4 on economic, social and cultural rights. You see it as a text, but I remember it was very difficult to have the final argument, final agreement on the text as it is now. OPIC provides for three types of communication. Of course, first of all, it's individual communications brought by individual or group of individuals or on their behalf. Then it is the interstate communication. So it can be communication against by state and against state. And thirdly, it's an inquiry procedure for grave and systematic violation. It was also the question how we go about those different instruments or mechanisms, because there were different views among the member states. We have to reach the consensus, and also I wanted to make this treaty to be ratified in the future by as many states as possible. So we were using kind of opt-in and opt-out, I would say, methods for interstate communications, which by that time were rarely used, or if ever, we used opt-in. So that means that you you can, in whatever time, not only at the ratification or signature, but whatever time you become to party, you can make declaration that you recognize competence of the Committee on the Rights of the Child to hear interstate complaints. And I've noticed a number of states were declaring and deposit these declarations according to Article 12 of the OPIC, and they are recognizing the interstate communication. It was not used before, but now it's used more and more, especially with the armed conflicts and wars in Georgia, first 2008, and of course, unfortunately now in Ukraine. So this mechanism can be used more often, unfortunately, also in the future. But also we used opt-out formula, and that we used for inquiry procedure. We wanted to have it in for it's dealing with the grave and systemic violations, and then in inquiry procedure you don't have to have communication. Committee can act itself, can act from the information they get from whatever sources, and when they consider that information as very valid and there are some suspicions or concerns that systemic and grave violations are happening, then committee can engage in the inquiry procedure. And that inquiry procedure, we established the opt-out formula. So states, when they're signing, ratifying, acceding to protocol, they can say they don't want to be part of that, and they don't want to have this inquiry procedure vis-a-vis their respective states. So, but you see there is a difference. With opting in, opt-in, you can do it whenever you wish, whenever during your presence or during the time you are party to the treaty. While opt-out you can do only on a specific instances, signing, ratifying, or acceding. So we wanted to have it as much as we can. What is not in the optional protocol, it is the communications procedure, which was heavily advocated by especially again by the civil sector, by NGO community, but the time was not ripe yet. It was difficult decision. Edita was part of the negotiations. Maybe you also recall it. At the end of the day, I kind of had to sacrifice the communications, collective communications procedure to keep the document strong on other points and to keep the document which would be basis for consensual adoption. I would also would like to underline at 3 instances in Human Rights Council and also in General Assembly of the United Nations in New York, we enjoyed the consensus, which I think is still quite incredible, because we are not speaking about the regional organization, or we are not speaking about 27 EU member states or 46 Council of Europe member states, but the whole UN membership, when you have countries like Iran or DPRK and other countries who do not have the really good human rights record, but still they were able to, all United Nations members were able to agree to this text, which I'm really happy. I'm also very proud of some provisions which made it into the text. For instance, protection measures in Article 4, which says that a state party shall take all appropriate steps to ensure that individuals who come with the complaints are not subjected to any consequences of doing this communication. And I remember we decided to move this protection measure to the general provisions to provide it for more, I would say, prominent place and as a kind of general principle. So you will find it in Article 4. The best interest of the child, of course, it's again dominating. You see it in the Article 2, and of course the right of a child to be heard It's also in Article 2, and actually this adoption of the protocol is the best example how the right enshrined in the convention itself was implemented, and that its right to be heard, which was materialized by adoption of the OPIC protocol. The views of the child have to be given due weight in accordance with the age and maturity of the child. So I think this is maybe in a nutshell what I wanted to say, also with some maybe background information which you will not find in the reports. Again, I'm very happy that Lithuania was able to ratify the protocol. I think it was New Zealand and Lithuania ratifying this year. And again, I hope that you will set a good example for other member states, including EU member states. There are some EU member states which I have seen in the list who signed the OPIC. Some of them signed in February 2011. On 28 February 2011 was a signature ceremony when the protocol was in Geneva open for signature, and some states have signed but have not ratified the OPIC yet, and I hope they will do so. The advocacy is very important. I don't know if there are representatives from NGO and from civil society, but the advocacy of for ratification is also very important, because you need to make campaign. You need to speak to the states and to the representatives of the various ministries, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Labor, Social Affairs, Family, to persuade the member states to ratify this instrument. And I have full respect for any state who will do so, because then you are giving up your part of sovereignty, part of jurisdiction, and then sometimes you face quite, I would say, unpleasant communications. I recall, I didn't know that at the time when it was adopted, that, for instance, the many files and many complaints about on the migration issues, migrant children, will be brought to the Committee on the Rights of the Child. By coincidence, I continued, and between 2020 and 2021, I held the mandate of the Special Representative of the Secretary General of the Council on Migration and Refugees, and then again I came back to the optional protocol with a number of communications directed, actually, or focused on the topic of migration, especially against Spain. I would also appreciate the Child Rights Connect organization with a very good website where you can find I think all comprehensive documents and materials and news about the optional protocol, OPIC. So if you want to learn more, it's opic.childrightsconnect.org, and I think we need such websites and such a driving forces for the ratification. And I thank again Lithuania for hosting this conference, Edita, Madam Ombudsperson, for Lithuania to having this position of Ombudsman for rights of the child. It's not in all countries. For instance, in my home country we have Ombudsperson, but we don't have a specific. Actually, we have also now a specific Ombudsman, but only recently created, and it was not since the beginning. So it's good that we have Ombudspersons specifically dealing with the rights of the child, and as it was the example mentioned by chair of the Human Rights Committee of Seimas, Tomas Vytautas, it's really needed. Thank you once again, and also with regards to people present here physically, but also online. Thank you.
Labai dėkoju gerbiamam pranešėjui.
Thank you, Mr. Drahoslav Stefanek, for your speech. I believe that we might have some questions for you, but as it has been envisaged in the program, we're going to have the question and answer session after the last presentation of the session. So I also have questions myself, but I will put forward the question once we have the special time for that. But I was very happy to hear the story from the person who was at the root, at the very beginning of the adoption of the optional protocol, and how everything was happening in real life. Well, it seems that we can put forward the questions right now. So Edita Žiobienė told me that if you have any questions to Mr. Drahoslav Stefanek, you can put the questions now. So do you have any questions? If you have any questions, raise your hand. Well, if there are no questions, then I have a question myself. I'll try to break the ice, and maybe you will have questions later. So we do have some minutes before the next speaker, and I hope that Darius Staniulis will find it okay if we have a short break now for question and answers. So my question is as follows. As I was listening to the presentation, to your speech, well, I am trying to formulate the question to myself. All the instruments that we are developing or think of at the very beginning are aimed at for the best objectives. First and foremost, to ensure the rights of children. But is it enough to develop an instrument, or we need something else to ensure that instrument is effective and it achieves its dedicated target? Is there any key? Maybe if there are some best practices which can help us in implementing the new instrument. What is the key to success to ensure that the instrument is effective and successful, and that we achieve the results at the maximum, so that children can submit their communication to the responsible party? So do you think that the instrument in itself is already a guarantee that it will be successful and it will serve its purpose? Thank you.
Maybe I can try to answer in the meantime if there are any other questions. I'm sorry, I will have to leave around 11:45 because I have still a number of meetings and activities here in Vilnius during today's visit. Of course, this is a valid question which I was posing to myself also when we were negotiating the instrument. That's why I mentioned this during my first intervention. I wanted to be realistic. I wanted to have an ambitious document, but not over-ambitious, because I want to attract as many countries as possible. But also, I would say even the mere existence, the fact that this procedure exists, is as I would say, great achievement, because it is setting an example, and it is giving a hope to number of children or their representatives, or that those rights will be heard at the national level. Of course, there is this provision, and this is typical provision for not only for treaty bodies, but also for the courts, that you have to exhaust local remedies. You have this also for instance, European Court of Human Rights. But also there are some exceptions. If the local remedies are not effective, or they are too long, then Committee on the Rights of the Child can declare the competence to hear the case. So you see, so at some instances, on some occasions, the Committee on the Rights of the Child can even, I would say, replace the national authorities if they are not giving the justice on time, because late justice is lame justice or no justice. This also I would like to underline. And it's also giving a good example to possible regional mechanisms. We were facing a number of questions. We are not competing, or at the beginning arguments against the optional protocol, where that you have the Human Rights Committee, you have the International Covenant on civil and political rights, and the rights of the child could be addressed there. But I was also saying we need child-specific and child-sensitive procedure. So this is document which is actually including everything of that kind. And also I should mention that in 2013, that was some time after I finished my position, the Committee on the Rights of the Child elaborated the rules of procedure concerning the communication. So again, developing the child-sensitive procedures in a further step. The committee is providing, it's giving its communications in responses to the various violations of the convention. Also, what I have omitted to say, and I'm taking this opportunity now, that we are not addressing only violations coming out from the Convention on the Rights of the Child, but also it's two optional protocols on involvement of children in armed conflict and on sales of children, child pornography and child prostitution. So this is also very very topical question to have opt-in, opt-out, or to how to address that, but we took it as an obligation. OPIC communications procedure is concerning convention and its two substantive protocols, because this protocol is not, I would say, it's not dealing with the substance, it's dealing with the procedure. So this is also very very important fact. I read about the revolutionary decision of the Committee on the Rights of the Child on admissibility to hear the case on the climate change brought by, I think, 16 children or the representatives, I think, against Argentina. So that's also a fantastic move, not only within the context of the rights of the child, but in general on the climate change. Climate refugees, we spoke about migration. That will be a topical issue, or it already is, but it will be getting worse. So to connect also these dots, I would say, and setting a good example, or I would say of having this procedure used in practice, but also disseminated in member states, and also to be subject of this kind of discussions as we are having today. But also the existence of such a mechanism is a great tool. As I say, now we have 50 states parties. I hope we will have more, but also we have to be realistic that there are some states which are not parties to any communications procedure, with the Human Rights Committee or on the Committee against Elimination of Discrimination against Women, and so on and so forth. So some states have the policy not to be part of the communications procedure, and it is a reality which we have to face. And of course, there is also very important role of national human rights institutions and institutions as ombudsperson, as Edita is holding, to implement and because at the end of the day, convention and its protocols are implemented at the national level. Thank you.
Ačiū, liktai girdžiu, kad jau vertėjo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So are there any questions from the audience? I know that we usually have very many questions quite some time after the presentations. So once you come home, you think of the question and you think, well, I could have asked that one or another question. But maybe in order to get all the answers, you simply have to write to the Ombudsperson's Office of the Republic of Lithuania, and you will get all the answers. So thank you, Mr. Drahoslav Stefanik, for your presentation, and we were very happy to have you at our conference. Our next speaker is Mr. Darius Staniulis, who is Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary and the Permanent Representative at the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Lithuania to the United Nations Office. He's going to speak about the Child's Rights Committee in the United Nations System of Human Rights. Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for the invitation to participate in this conference. I feel honored to share my knowledge, my experience with you. I have accumulated this experience during my work in the United Nations office, and I was very happy to hear the presentations by the person who directly, I would say, was writing this optional protocol. Because we usually treat the international documents as some kind of outcome that was created, delivered by people. But I was very happy to see the drafter of this document here in the hall. Most probably, many of the steps of the drafting of this document were taken in a certain context, and the context is the subject of my presentation, because I want to talk about the processes under which the Convention on the Rights of the Child is functioning, and the processes should be taken into account when implementing our international obligations. The entire system is functioning as a coherent system. It offers various economic, financial, and other instruments, and it does influences the context of the rights of the child. The optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on a communications procedure is related to the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. We should bear this in mind, because that protocol and the two other protocols are intended to ensure the efficient implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Therefore, when implementing the Convention itself, various multilateral formats must be taken into account. As today we are holding a meeting at the Lithuanian Parliament, let me mention one document that was adopted by the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child in August this year. The Committee on the Rights of the Child is the institution that deals with communications. Under the statement, were called to engage in the implementation of the Convention, to be able to provide the holistic approach and to take into account of the key interest of the child, that is to ensure the rights of the children. And the countries also were called for allocating sufficient budget for children, and parliamentarians were encouraged to use their platforms, including the media, their electorate, to promote the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And I believe that this event is related to the implementation of the recommendations of this committee. I'd like to draw the attention to the fact that the United Committee on the Rights of the Child functions under the international treaty, while the Interparliamentary Union is a different international body. So those two bodies have made a statement, a joint statement, and this shows the great significance of the rights of the child.
Mūsų tarptautinių įsipareigojimų ir ypač
When it comes to our international commitments, Lithuania is a party to 16 United Nations international documents out of 18, 9 of which are conventions and 9 of which are conventional protocols. For the implementation of these commitments, there are several mechanisms that are employed, and that is the supervision of the committees. There are 9 committees and 1 subcommittee, and this framework is based not only but also on the commitments of the state in a concrete field of the rights of the child and on the assessment of the situation. General comments are yet another important area, and it is also important to note that all these committees can work either separately or jointly. The competencies arise from different conventions, but again, they are coordinated. There are informal coordination when it comes to the content. The United Committee on the Rights of the Child have always made references to the documents of other committees. When it comes to the optional protocol to the Convention on the Sale of the Children and optional protocol on the involvement of children in armed conflict is supervised by the committee. And very soon, in May next year, there are plans. The consideration of the 5th and the 6th report by Lithuania, the report that was submitted back in 2020, and we will have the opportunity to receive the conclusions by the committee concerning the Lithuania's report. It should also be noted that with a number of states ratifying the convention increasing, the scope of the work of the committee is also increasing, and the committee is not always capable of looking at all the cases. Therefore, for some time now, we are already thinking as to how to deal with all those assignments, and we are looking for ways how to do our job and how to ensure that our system is more effective and efficient. When it comes to individual communications in the United Nations, Lithuania, Lithuania was not very active at the very beginning. However, we still have 3 conventions: Convention against Inhumane Treatment, as well as other 2 documents. So far, so good. Under certain procedures, we have more decisions. I know that people from Lithuania submit their communications to the committees. But within the context on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, no decisions have been taken in this respect. When it comes to statistics, the last year, the Committee on the Rights of the Child received approximately 400 individual communications, since this convention is among the most popular conventions, and United Nations member states are parties to the convention. Only 1/4 of the countries have recognized this procedure. So I don't think that 400 individual communications is a huge number. Maybe there are some reasons behind that. So unfortunately, due to the previously mentioned reasons, we don't have enough capabilities to deal with all the communications, and the communication is dealt with in 2 years. Usually communications are received from various parts of the world. None of the countries is immune to that. The committee had to deal the communications on determining the age of unattended minor migrants, on the deportation of migrant children, on the on climate change, on non-recognition of qualifications. So we also have quite a lot of communications with respect to migration, and the scope of them is expanding further. Well, in fact, I believe that we face many more human rights challenges. There are quite a lot of armed conflicts. Although digitalization has brought some positive impacts to our life, but this also has some negative influence. Now, when it comes to the admissibility of the communication, first we have to look at the provisions of the convention. Sometimes, in some cases, the documents adopted by the Committee on the Rights of the Child and some political documents should also be taken into account. Maybe I'll speak very briefly. It has already been mentioned today that there is a very important document that is the general comments by the Committee on the Rights of the Child. These comments are issued every second year, but again, they might be issued even more often. In 2016, there was a general comment on the financing of children, as well on life in adolescent years. In 2017, there were general comments on the children in street. In 2019, on children in migration. In 2021, there was a general concept on the digital environment of children. So this is one of the source of the documents that are adopted by the Committee on the Rights of the Child. Another source is maybe a political one, and these are the resolutions. We already heard how resolutions contributed to the drafting of the optional protocol. So a majority of the documents of the Council of Europe are political documents. Lithuania has become a party to the optional protocol this year, although the resolutions do not have an impact on the legal environment, but on the interpretation of the content of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, it does contribute to that. Resolutions, apart from general topics, deal with for example, family reunion, with empowering children with disabilities, with children in conflict zones, with digital environment. When it comes to resolutions on the rights of the child, we have to take note of the international cooperation between the EU, Latin and Caribbean countries. These other countries agree on which topics they are going to talk. Maybe colleagues from Latin America are more prone to raise, let's say, economic issues, while Western countries tend to put forward some more general topics. There is yet another instrument which has an impact. That is, they are special reporters.
Ir šitie specialūs pranešėjai, kurių didžioji dalis.
Special reporters usually prepare reports on various topics and provide guidelines and recommendations in the area of the rights of the child and many other topics. The universal periodic assessment is also a very important instrument when countries provide their reports and other countries assess them. Lithuania has already completed 3 stages, have taken 3 stages of such assessment, and the last was at the beginning of this year, and Lithuania received 232 recommendations from 82 countries. One of the recommendations was related to the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on a communications procedure. So, Lithuania implemented one of the recommendations provided, so that was a rather formal part. Let me also mention, well, since I am experienced in the work in Geneva, but we have to mention that the United Nations is a very broad institution. We have an office in New York, which also looks into the questions related to the rights of the child. There's also a financial part to the work of the United Nations, and I should be talking about UNICEF, but I guess we would need a separate event for this matter. I hope I provided you with some key information as to how the international institutions operate. I wanted to show that the Convention on the Rights of the Child does not function in isolation, and sometimes we have to look into the various sources. all this system is very complex one. One element of the system may influence another. Maybe it is not the most effective, but it is a system of striking compromises. At the same time, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that both the international system and our national system are interrelated. We simply have to make use of the international experience, and we have an opportunity to contribute to the changes because this is a two-way street. When it comes to the complaint procedure, I guess no one is very pleased when, let's say, violations and infringements are identified. But once you receive a complaint, you know that you have a possibility to see the problems more clearly, and even you might receive some guidance as to how to deal with the problem. Both the communications procedure and other procedures mean empowerment of people. Empowering people can bring some changes. Because once you look into the situation from your own perspective, it looks one way, but once you look into the situation from the perspective of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and let's say from the cases that are taken to the Court of Human Rights or from some personal experience, you see that sometimes problems are difficult to identify, but they must be solved. So this optional protocol provides our people and the system of the rights of the child to address all the problems. Thank you.
Ačiū labai, Darius Staniulis.
Thank you, Mr. Staniulis, for your presentation. And we can understand that there's a multitude of instruments and legal acts and shields that help us to safeguard, ensure children's rights. And the key thing is that while taking that decision, we have to know that we might make mistakes. It is unpleasant when violations are identified, but when we take the decisions that are in the interest of the child, we do this in courts as well. This is the core and the basis. If, for example, the rights of the child are not violated in essence, this might be helpful for us. We always have to remember the motive when taking the decision and the interest that is being defended. So that was my reaction to your presentation, Mr. Staniulis. Thank you very much. And now we have a presentation that will be delivered via Zoom It will be made by a representative of a rather new institution, an advisor to the Commissioner for Human Rights of the Council of Europe. This institution was established in 1999. It deals not only with children, but mostly with children. These are the people who are the most important, I mean the children, and are the most insecure because of their age. And now I would like to give the floor to Charlotte Altenhorne-Dion, and she will speak about the mandate and activities of the Council of Europe's Commissioner for Human Rights related to children.
Yes, good morning to you all, and thank you very much to the organizers. I hope you can hear me. Good. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to present another set of Lithuania's international obligations with respect to children's rights, and those are stemming from the mandate and activities of the Commissioner for Human Rights of the Council of Europe. Next slide, please. The Commissioner's office was established 50 years after the Council of Europe. So in 1999, by the heads of states of the Committee of Ministers, to promote awareness of and respect for human rights in the now 46 member states. It has an independent, impartial, and non-judicial mandate. Non-judicial means that it is focusing on general reform measures to achieve results over time. It does not take usually action upon individual complaints. So it's not an individual complaints mechanism as, for instance, the Committee on the Rights of the Child can be after the protokol has been ratified. But the Commissioner can draw conclusions, of course, for her broader human rights work from experiences suffered by individuals. She's elected for a non-renewable term for 6 years. Next slide, please. By the Parliamentary Assembly. The current incumbent is Dunja Mijatovic, and she was elected in April 2018. Next slide, please. The mandate was laid down in 1999 in a resolution of the Committee of Ministers. The Commissioner is tasked to promote the effective observance of human rights and to assist member states in the Council of Europe area in their promotion and implementation of Council of Europe standards. And this is not only the European Convention of Human Rights, but also other conventions, for instance, the Lanzarote Convention, or also non-legally binding standards, such as the guidelines on child-friendly justice that have also been mentioned today. She works mainly by monitoring the situation in the member states and identifying shortcomings in law and practice. Beyond that country work, she also works thematically on specific issues, and on her website are quite extensive thematic pages, also including on children's rights, of course, on women's rights, on social rights, on issues related to human rights and the environment, on migration issues, where she shares her perspectives and gives advice to all member states, also to civil society activists and the public. Raising generally public awareness is quite an important part of the mandate as well, as is the facilitation of the work of national human rights structures in member states and that of human rights defenders. Next slide, please. So the activities of the Commissioner have four important aspects. There's the country work, of course, the thematic work, the support to other independent institutions, and also international cooperation. And this is an important part as well. She cooperates with a broad range of international and national institutions, as well as human rights monitoring mechanisms, including, of course, the United Nations and its specialized bodies, the Children's Rights Committee, but also the UNHCR and other bodies, the European Union, of course, OSCE, and also she cooperates with international leading human rights NGOs. Next slide, please. Coming to the country monitoring work, this is done from Strasbourg through kind of observance from afar, but also importantly, of course, through country visits. These are organized roughly every 4, 5, sometimes 6 years. The Commissioner will meet with central, regional, and local authorities, with civil society organizations as well, and human rights defenders. She will also meet with young people and children, also ordinary people who have human rights concerns. She can visit juvenile justice institutions, for instance, psychiatric hospitals, detention centers, but also food banks or orphanages. The last country visit to Lithuania took place in December 2016. And this was a country visit by Niels Mužnieks, so the predecessor of the current commissioner, who focused on the protection of women, children, notably against different forms of violence, and also on the rights of persons with disabilities to autonomous and independent living. As a follow-up to that visit, there was a letter written to Parliament, to the Lithuanian Parliament, focusing in particular on the protection of children from violence and recommending that the legislative framework should be strengthened for children. And in line with, of course, the UN Children's Rights Convention, incorporating also a ban on all forms of punishment, including corporal punishment. And that was, in fact, then adopted by Parliament. I think there was a special session on children's rights in the Lithuanian Parliament in February of 2017, and that is when the ban on all forms of violence against children was adopted. Among others, also as follow-up to the Commissioner's visit. Next slide, please. An important part from a country perspective in the Commissioner's work is also her interaction with the European Court of Human Rights. Here she can submit third-party interventions and has done that quite regularly, including, of course, underlining children's rights and the rights enshrined in the UN Children's Rights Convention, but also rights related to the environment. She has also submitted one third-party intervention in a case against France related to the treatment when it comes to the repatriation of children and the need to repatriate them from camps in northeast Syria. There have, however, not been any third-party interventions on Lithuanian cases. Next slide, please. Once a judgment has been issued by the court and the execution is supervised by the Council of Europe's Committee of Ministers, the Commissioner can also submit her perspective to the Committee of Ministers on what the member states should really do to prevent further human rights violations, like the one found in the case, and what general measures need to be taken by the member state in order to prevent further such violations. Again, there has been no Rule 9 submission related to Lithuania. Next slide, please. Coming to the thematic work and the awareness raising, this again is an important part of the Commissioner's activities. She has focused on different aspects of particularly children's rights. I will speak about that now. There was, for instance, a human rights comment on calling on member states to strengthen opportunities for children to participate in all matters that affect them. So really stressing the importance of child participation and of Article 12 of the UN Children's Rights Convention, which is really the least well implemented article of all the articles. She has also released statements recently with calls on member states to urgently address the growing levels of child poverty across the continent as a result, of course, of the cost of living crisis, energy crisis. She has also underlined the devastating impact of the Russian war in Ukraine on children and called on member states to prioritize continued support, both through increased humanitarian assistance to the population in Ukraine, now ahead of the winter and throughout the winter, but also to those Ukrainian children and their families who are seeking refuge in the member states. Through sustainable provision with housing, education, and also other basic needs. And she has talked about the necessity to cooperate with all available international mechanisms to support the situation of children who have been forcibly displaced displaced from Ukraine to Russia and must be located and brought back to their families or legal guardians. Next slide, please. As part of her mandate, the Commissioner also cooperates very closely with national human rights structures, including, of course, the Ombudspersons for Children. And she has always underlined the importance of this cooperation for her mandate, as national human rights structures really are the eyes and ears for the Commissioner on the ground. This was very important, for instance, during COVID, because the Commissioner, of course, was not traveling, and it was national human rights structures and independent institutions such as the Ombudspersons for Children who first saw the human rights violations on the ground and communicated with the Commissioner, and she raised awareness on a number of issues and also supported the work of ENRI, for instance, and also of ENOC in the course of the pandemic. The Commissioner will also support NHRS, or structures, we say, national human rights structures, whose independence is being threatened, as it is in some member states. This is not the case in Lithuania, but following the visit to Lithuania in 2016, in the letter to the Lithuanian Parliament, the Commissioner also reminded parliamentarians of the important role of Parliament towards creating a favorable environment for the work of key human rights institutions in the area of children's rights, and for the need to support their work, not only by allowing them to discharge their mandate in an independent and effective manner, but also, of course, by allocating adequate resources to allow them to carry out their functions. Next slide, please. The Commissioner will also be addressing the work of human rights defenders, supporting that, and calling on member states to perform effective investigations into violence and violations committed by state and non-state actors against human rights defenders. Unfortunately, impunity of perpetrators is really growing across member states, and this is an issue that is of great concern to the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, because she, of course, cooperates closely with human rights defenders and considers their work absolutely essential to the upholding of standards in member states. Next slide, please. Just a few words on the main recent messages that the Commissioner for Human Rights has issued to the Lithuanian authorities, including related to children's rights. The most recent intervention was a letter to the Prime Minister in August 2021. And there the Commissioner called for the response to migration-related challenges that Lithuania had then and still has, I understand, in the context of the Belarus border, the border with Belarus, calling on the authorities to be fully compliant with Lithuania's human rights obligations and to ensure fair asylum procedures, preventing summary returns without adequate safeguards, stressing that the rights of individuals cannot become subordinate to geopolitical considerations, and of course acknowledging there are significant challenges at the border, and there are deliberate actions by other actors to destabilize the border, but expressing her concern really about the amendments that had been adopted to the law on the legal status of aliens, and also accompanying legislation regarding summary removal and detentions. And these amendments were, of course, later also found incompatible with EU law by the Court of Justice of the European Union. In April 2017, after the country visit in December 2016, there was the report issued. And in the report, now only focusing on children's rights, the Commissioner called on ending the practice of institutionalization of orphans and children without parental care, especially those under the age of 3, and also asked for more training and study opportunities for child protection professionals in order to eliminate still existing disparities between the different care centers and strengthen locally available support services that can meet the needs of the whole population. She also called on the authorities to tackle the reports of ill treatment in the so-called socialization centers, and develop a justice system that was more in line with the needs of children and young offenders, and to render it fully compatible with the guidelines on child-friendly justice of the Council of Europe. Next slide, please. I'm coming to an end of my presentation, and will thank you very much for the attention. And I'm happy, of course, to respond to any questions that you may have now.
Thank you very much, dear Charlotte Altenhöner-Dion. Do you hear the translation of our conference? You can understand if I will. You will understand that I will. Okay. Okay. So tada grįžtame į lietuvių kalbą.
I'll switch into the Lithuanian language then. And it seems that we have come to an end of the first part of this conference. So having listened to Ms. Charlotte Dion, do you have any questions for the speaker? Because our foreign guests will have to leave and we won't be able to give questions later on. We have the advisor with us, so you have the opportunity to ask a question. Since the presentation was very extensive and wide, you have heard of the functioning of the institution. Maybe you have a question related to your daily work. Maybe you're faced with some problems. Could you turn on the microphone? Well, in fact, it is very difficult to raise the first question, but when speaking, the speaker talked about the situation in Ukraine. We all know that everyone in Lithuania is doing its utmost to help Ukraine. Every municipality, every town, every village provides services. But how you help the Ukrainian children? What can you say you do in helping to those children who stayed in Ukraine?
Dear Charlotte, did you hear?
Did you hear the question? Can you answer the question?
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question, and it of course also points to the limits of the mandate of the Commissioner for Human Rights. We are an independent institution working from Strasbourg. The Commissioner has, however, gone to Ukraine several times, and she will draw the attention of member states to the need to provide more support. And I think Lithuania and Baltic states generally, and the states particularly surrounding Ukraine, have done absolutely incredible support, and we see that across Europe. However, there are some member states where there is now also a little bit of doubt being raised and points made such as, well, we first need to look after our own population that is also suffering as a result of the cost of living crisis. So the Commissioner will be speaking particularly in those member states and will be ensuring that that support is continuously generated for Ukrainian children. But she also has quiet diplomacy, so to speak, and bilateral discussions with the Ombudsman of Ukraine, with the International Red Cross, for instance, on trying to make sure that aid comes to children in particular areas that are particularly heavily affected by conflict, that those children can be evacuated, etc. So she has, I mean, I raised the issue of Ukraine in her thematic and human rights awareness raising work, because she does that, but then she also works quietly behind the scenes with international stakeholders to try to ensure that aid comes to those most in need.
Thank you. One more question. Oi, dar vienas klausimas.
Labadiena.
Good morning. I wonder how much attention the Commissioner pays attention to children with disabilities in Ukraine? And do you know about the statement of the Joint Committee on the situation of children with disabilities in Ukraine?
May I just, this is also a good question. The situation of children with disabilities in Ukraine is of very deep concern, of course. The Commissioner and quite a number of international institutions were in fact working on that already even prior to the conflict, because Ukraine had, due to a number of other priorities, of course, still a particularly unusually high number of children in institutions before the 24th of February. And then, of course, the situation became particularly dire when they were evacuated, and it wasn't always clear who was evacuated and how and where to and with whom, etc. So here also the Commissioner is in close contact with the Ombudsman Institution of Ukraine and also with other international actors. She is also planning to do more public work on that situation and generally on children in Ukraine and their various issues. So not only children with disabilities, but also including those also, for instance, with respect to education and other aspects. But that is not entirely clear yet when we will come out more publicly with that. But there is work being done privately with a number of different actors.
Dėkui. Gal dar
Thank you.
klausimą? Komisarės.
Anyone else with a question? May I? If I may, Madam Charlotte, do you have a plan? Do you have any plans to come to Lithuania?
That's a very kind question. I would absolutely love to. And I'm not currently, I don't know of any plan of a country visit, however, right now of the Commissioner. Lithuania is not one of the deep urgent priority countries right now where we feel that a visit has to take place. And 2016 is less recent than other. We have countries where the Commissioner has not been able to travel to for even longer. So I don't foresee any Commissioner travel in the next year. And personally, if I will always be looking forward to going to Lithuania.
Dėkui.
Thank you very much. I see that there's no one else with a question in the audience. So if there are no questions, we'll thank our keynote speaker as well as other keynote speakers, both present here and those who have already left. And now we're going to have a coffee break. And during the coffee break, you will be able to engage in real discussions.
Ir sušilsim visi. Iš tiesų teisingai.
So you will be able to enjoy a cup of tea or coffee and you will get warmer.
Intensively, how to say, cooling. Yes. So thank you very much for being together with us. Goodbye. See you.